Meeting to order. And everyone please mute your microphone and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. City Clerk, please call the roll.
If it's possible, Commissioner Larios and Vice Chair Andrioli, do you have video access? There you go. Thank you. Chair Klein.
Present.
Vice Chair Andrioli.
Present.
Commissioner Condon. I saw his mouth say present, but he's muted.
Present.
There we go. Commissioner Larios.
Present.
Commissioner Saktava.
Here.
You have a quorum.
City Clerk, do we have any changes to the agenda?
The only change I would like to suggest is that when we get to presentation item number 1, we defer that to the next meeting. So we can talk about that when that comes up. But otherwise, there are no changes.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I will second it.
Thank you.
If you could please state your name when you're making and seconding the motion, that would be helpful. The motion this time was by Vice Chair Andrioli, seconded by Commissioner Saktava to approve the agenda. I'll call the roll. Chair Klein?
Aye.
Vice Chair Andrioli?
Aye.
Commissioner Condon?
Aye.
Commissioner Larios?
Yes.
Commissioner Saktava?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Now we will take public comments from members of the audience. If you would like to provide a public comment through Zoom, please click the raise hand button.
I'm currently seeing no hands raised in Zoom.
Okay. We'll now go to the presentations.
Chair Klein and Commissioners, this item was for the selection of chair and vice chair, which would be for the term ending June 30th. Since we only have one more meeting before that in May, I would recommend deferring action on this item until the new commissioners are selected.
Okay, so deferred.
Thank you. Item number 2 is presentation of gas enterprise cost of service study and rate design. And Public Utilities General Manager Alan will present the item.
Hey, Lisa, this is Todd Dusenberry, and I'm the Assistant General Manager at BPU, and I'll be presenting the item this morning.
Sorry about that, Todd. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
No problem. So I'll go ahead and pull that out for you, Todd. One moment.
Thank you, Matthew. Thanks, Matthew. Do you mind starting my video? Or
Sure.
prompting?
Okay, so I'll go ahead and go to the next slide for you. Right there.
Yeah, Matthew, you can go to the previous slide, but
Oh,
I
sure.
think you've got my video stopped. I can't start my video for myself, for my camera.
Oh, here. I'll ask you to start video.
There we go. Thank you.
There it goes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners.
Good morning.
We're very pleased today to have the opportunity to present and discuss the gas cost of service study. We've been working on this over the past year. And along with that, I'd like to provide some background and some recommendations on future gas rates. As an introduction, the last time I was able to present at BIC, we received a lot of support from BIC on a revamped capital improvement plan and bond funding plan, and our initiative to provide Vernon groundwater versus importing water, which is much more expensive through Central Basin. I'm happy to report that through the rehabilitation of existing facilities and construction of new facilities, we haven't had to import water in the last 14 months, and the water rate increases supported by BIC and the City Council enabled us to invest in our infrastructure, resulting in increased reliability and overall future cost savings. So today, in a similar fashion, we'd like to discuss the gas system that supplies gas to the Vernon business community and supplies gas to the Malberg generating station. With that gas at MGS is used to produce the majority of the electricity in the city. So in undertaking this study, we plan to follow the same template that has proven successful for the electric and water enterprises over the last couple of years. Just to give a little context, we've served electric and water to the city and the community for nearly a century. But to contrast that with the gas system is only 16 years old, relatively young and still growing. So at this point, we want to make sure that the system has the funding to address aging proactively and enable more Vernon customers to utilize the system in the future. Next slide, please, Matthew.
Alrighty.
Thank you. So as an overview, we did solicit a third party to perform the study so that we had an independent look at our overall gas system. The company NewGen Strategies and Solutions was identified, and we did that through a competitive process. The project manager was Tony Georges. Tony has more than 20 years of utility, financial, and regulatory experience in evaluating utilities. Tony helped us work through the electric cost of service and rate design that you may be familiar with over the past few years. So he came to us with a great deal of familiarity on how we do things, the unique makeup of Vernon and its business customers, and that was very helpful through the process. Also, Tony's on hand today to help us with part of the presentation and answer any questions you might have. So over the past year, we've been reviewing the gas enterprise, the costs associated with running that gas enterprise, and took a look at rates and where we're headed into the future. We do have a total of 124 gas customers. So just to provide a little context around that, we have 1,000 water customers in the city, and we have 2,000 electric customers. So the gas enterprise is relatively small, but as we stated, we hope to grow that in the future. So we do have 4 types of customer classes that we bill on the gas. The G1, which is residential, G2, large commercial. G3 doesn't purchase the commodity of gas, but we transport the gas to them. And G4, which is your commercial class. Next slide, Matthew.
Alrighty.
Okay, so to meet the gas revenue requirement, it states that the BPU gas enterprise needs to recover its costs. As a publicly owned utility or a community-based utility, we simply recover our costs, and that happens through the rate that we charge. The things that we recover for: labor, maintenance, supplies, equipment, capital investments that we put back into the system. We need to pay for the cost to connect new customers. And then we do have administrative costs for us here in BPU that help support the gas utility. And there is a regulatory cost to doing business. Currently, the gas enterprise fund does credit customers 5% on the bill. And that's a result of the Measure R Utility Users Tax, or UUT, that at the time when that was enacted, helped make that a revenue neutral measure. We do expect a shortfall of approximately $1.8 million per year beginning 2022. And I'd really like to emphasize this point that since 2006, when the gas system was constructed, we've never had a rate increase. You know, and that's not typical of most utilities. So that's why we're here today. Next slide, Matthew.
Alrighty.
So this gives you an idea of where that $1.8 million comes from. So our cost to do business and provide a reliable service to the business community is $12.9 million. Our current rates and what we recover through those rates give us revenues of $11.7 million. So we have a $1.2 million gap there that we'd like to close. On top of that, then on the customer bill, we do give about $600,000 back in the VPU credit for a total of $1.8 million that we'd like to recover. So the VPU Gas Enterprise Fund is projected to have a revenue shortfall over the next 3 years. And we'd like to close that gap in a phased in approach over the next 3 years. Next slide, Matthew.
Alrighty.
So in terms of our goals and our priorities, when we undertook this exercise, we wanted to ensure that VPU's gas enterprise remains safe, reliable, responsive, resilient, and has the necessary funding to operate in those manners, and appropriately maintain the gas system to help us put what needs to go into the system without having massive capital outlay for the system in the future, just to maintain that system appropriately. We also wanted to ensure that the gas rates remain significantly lower than other gas providers. So a little bit different than electric in the city, we do have competition within the city. SoCalGas also serves customers within the city and has been serving gas to customers for quite a while. So in order for us to add gas customers to the system, we have to show the business that it makes financial sense for Vernon to serve them gas over what they could get it from SoCalGas at. Currently we are 50 to 60% lower in our G2 and G4 classes, and that's where most of our customers reside. We have no residential customers so far on the gas system, which is our G1 rate. And the most challenging rate for us to deal with was G3, because that's our slimmest margin in terms of competitiveness between us and SoCalGas. However, only 4 customers do reside on that rate. Next slide, Matthew. So we had a few objectives. We'd like to recover the deficit to create a self-sustaining, reliable enterprise moving into the future. So our recommendation to achieve that is to implement rate adjustments to be applied to all gas classes except residential, since there aren't any customers in that class. Our next objective was to keep this competitive advantage that we hold over SoCalGas while still raising rates to a certain extent. So even after the end of the 3-year phased in rate increase, we expect to be minimum 15 to 30% lower than SoCalGas rates. And I'd just like to point out that that's SoCalGas's current rate as we looked at it over the course of 2021. And we do fully expect that over the course of the next 3 years that SoCalGas would most likely raise their rates as well. But we do see a minimum of 15 to 30, and we expect that advantage to grow. So our recommendations are to minimize, a significant sudden burden on our customers, and phase this in over the course of 3 years to give our businesses a chance to take a look at it, to plan for this, and give us a 3-year approach. The other thing we'd like to do is to reduce the amount of the rate increase by eliminating that VPU credit that we give back to customers each year. And we'd like to do both of these beginning the start of our fiscal year, July 1. Next slide, Matthew. So at this point, this is our proposed strategy, and this is what we'd like to recommend to recover a full cost of service while maintaining that advantage. This is what our 3-year phase-in approach would look like. It would necessitate about a 5% increase to us per year to close that $1.8 million gap. So in year 1, we would not recommend implementing a rate increase. We would simply not pay that credit back to customers, which would equate to about a 5% increase for us. In year 2 and year 3 for G2 and G2 through G4 customers, we do recommend about an overall 5% increase. So the way per class that adjustment would break down is no change to G1, no residential customers, roughly 5.5% to our G2 larger customers. G3, only 1% per year, but in that class where we were typically 50 to 60% less than SoCal Gas, currently we're only about 7% less than SoCal Gas. So for those 4 customers, we did want to maintain that advantage, and have them feel like it was beneficial to be a burning gas customer. And then for the G4 commercial, approximately about a 4.5% increase for years 2 and years 3. All right, Matthew, next slide. So at this point, we're going to go through a couple technical slides, get a little more detailed so you can see how the study turned out. And I'd like to turn it over to Tony to present these slides.
Thanks, Todd. So these are the slides that are translating the overall rate strategy into the actual numbers that you would see if you're a G2, 3, or 4 customer on the gas system. So this top table here is just showing the 3 customer classes that you have, essentially a small commercial on G2, a large commercial on G4, and G3 is transportation only. So the differentiator there is they only receive the transportation of the commodity, the transportation of the natural gas to them. You're not providing the commodity, where in G2 and G4, you do provide the commodity. Across the top, you can see there the fiscal year 2023, 24, 25. So those are the 3 phases of overall bill changes, I think, as how I would categorize it. In the first year, we eliminate the 5% bill credit across the board, across all 3 of those customer classes. From there, we begin implementing a more competitive lens on the rate, phasing into the rate increases for the 3 classes. So you can see there G2 and G4 have similar rate increases, 5.7%, 5.6 for small commercial, just slightly under 5, about 4.6 for large commercial. And then again, in transportation, as Todd alluded to, where it is more competitive with those 4 customers, where you're only transporting the gas, you're not providing the commodity service, we would recommend a 1% per year for the final 2 years. So that's the overall bill change. And so what we were targeting is kind of an equal change year over year for those classes, with the exception of transport only. The bottom table here shows those same 3 customer classes, but then translates those bill changes into dollars, into driving towards that overall total revenue requirement, which is the total cost to operate the utility on an annual basis of about $12.8 million. So you can see there, translating those bill changes, whether it's the reduction in the VPU credit or the increase in the rates from 2023 through 2025, you can see how each year it increases in each of those classes. So for example, in G2, that 5% reduction, eliminating the 5% bill credit, we go from about 7 million in revenue in that first column to 7.4 million in revenue. And then the subsequent year in 2024, when we implement a 5.7% rate increase, roughly another $400,000. So you can see how there's an equitable march in those numbers year over year for those classes. And again, on the overall system basis, it's right at about $550,000 to $600,000 a year in increased revenues for the gas system, eventually building towards that final point in 2025 of the full revenue requirement. Next slide, please. So this is one of the unique things with VPU is you're actually competing side by side with SoCalGas. Oftentimes utilities don't necessarily compete, municipal or investor-owned utilities don't necessarily compete side by side with another utility. In gas, it's a little bit different, especially for Vernon. These are just showing you the competitive position of Vernon's rates and the cost service results versus where SoCalGas is. So in each of these slides, you'll see on an orange, that orange line that's in this case flat for G3, which is the transport only service. And actually, we'll go through this one, might back up to the prior one, but G3 is the transport only, so no commodity. And you can see here, this is where we were taking a little bit of a targeted view of how we would implement rate increases. So the one on the left here shows you the flat rate at about 16 cents per therm for that delivery service. Those dotted lines are the phased in rate increases that we're recommending at only 1% per phase or per year. And that's why they're all stacked basically on top of one another. And then that yellow line is the cost of service within that class. So that's why you can see the cost of service being above in some cases. The bottom, the x-axis there is showing you different consumption levels. So 50,000 therms per month all the way up to 250,000 therms there on that x-axis. So as you can see there, as you get larger in the consumption on a monthly basis, Vernon's rates get more and more and more competitive. And that's something I would agree with. And those are the types of customers you would want to be targeting. And I think Vernon is a little bit larger users. They're better for your system. They're more effective. So the graphic on the left and the graphic on the right show all the same stuff with the exception of not including riders. So there is an element within SoCalGas and in Vernon to some extent is what are the impacts of including these riders. And so that one on the left here are the greenhouse gas rider and things like that are supposed to be recovered by Vernon or have to be recovered by Vernon because they're incurring those costs. So that shows you the full bill on the left. If we took out these extra riders, which are primarily driven, from a state regulatory standpoint, not by Vernon specifically, if we took out those riders, you would see what just the core service would be from a competitive lens on the graphic on the right. So what you see here is if we weren't collecting those riders that from a state regulatory perspective, your rates would be much, much more competitive across the board just in G3. So we just want to highlight in G3, this is why we took a little bit more targeted approach to those rate increases from a competitive standpoint, because we wanted to remain competitive in those customers, because those are customers that actually do benefit your system, and the larger customers are ones you want to target. And there's just the four. If we could back up maybe one slide, if there's no questions on G3 competitive positioning. I think this should be G2, correct. So this is showing you G2. And again, same structure here, the orange line being SoCalGas, VPU's competitor. The dotted lines there down below are the phased in rates, phase 1, 2, and 3, as we go down from 2022 to, or 2023 to 5. So you can see here in all cases, 25 to 30% less than SoCalGas, and in some cases even more so, as you get out there with the larger customers. So again, maintaining a very strong competitive position, whether it's including those riders or not. So even including all those riders, or really just the one primarily, from Vernon's standpoint that you have to collect, you're still much, much more competitive. So in pursuing those customers in G2 and G4, you're going to be very, very, very competitive, as we bulleted on those prior slides. Substantially double digits percentages or greater for those two classes that you provide the commodity service. Any questions on the competitive positioning of the utility before we look at some monthly bills and then the timeline going forward?
Hey, Tony, this is Jack Klein. I just had a quick question: is how many Southern California gas customers are in the Vernon service area that would fall into this category of big users, the kinds that you want to target?
That would be in more of that transport only, the G3 class, or ones that would provide a commodity service, or all of the above, I guess.
I guess the commodity service.
That I don't know. Todd may have a handle on that. I know they're pinged constantly or consistently, I think, and they just had a customer come to them that I think they're about to connect, that's in this bucket, that they were substantially lower. But I don't have a handle on the number of customers that you could go out and pursue.
Okay, I mean, it would make no sense to me why these margins at large customers, if there's any that exist in SoCal, is there any reason why it's not easy for them to move over to Vernon?
Yeah, so Jack, let me try to answer that. So there is, one issue that the gas enterprise deals with is, since SoCal Gas was here prior to us building the gas system, many of those customers were connected, prior to us being able to connect them. So for a customer to connect to our gas system, they have to disconnect from the SoCal system, and we have to build our own connection from the distribution system to their facility. So there is a certain cost associated with connecting those customers, because we don't take over the SoCal line, which is already connected to their facility. So it has to make sense for a bigger customer to take on that cost and then receive the benefit of the lower rate over time, to make up for the cost of that connection. So that could be one reason. I do also have customer service here with me, and so they thought maybe about half of the customers. That there's still some more out there, but we can certainly get you an exact number.
But no, that's okay. I mean, there's only 124 customers. You got 1,000 in the water and power. The idea is to grow. What's that growth look like? Easy growth is acquisition of big customers. Sounds like the cost of acquisition of the customers is the hurdle. And anyhow, it seems like most of it is a capital cost. It's outside of the actual BTU. It's the capital cost, and somehow having more big customers could benefit all the other customers as well, maybe. So I don't know if that could be baked in. Maybe it makes sense to go out to a guy and amortize his cost of connection over a period of time as well to acquire those guys, because you only have 4 big guys. Is that what I read? You have 4 G4 customers, or am I misunderstanding something or forgetting something? So getting the 5th one would be super big, the 6th one really, and then you could double by just getting 4 more customers. So I don't, you guys are in the business. I just, I understand rate increases. I understand SoCal Edison is not competitive, so it's an easy, an easy target to, or an easy competitor to win. Just seems like there's a way to go after it. And again, I'm not in this business. You guys know, just curious, I guess.
No, thank you so much for the comments. Totally understand where you're going with that. And our gas superintendent's here in the room, and he's really targeted many of those big customers. And we've really brought on most of the big customers that we can. When I started here in Vernon 15 years ago, we had just a handful of customers. So we have grown quite a bit over the last 10 years, but right on with what you're saying, and we'll certainly look to do that.
And one comment I think I would add to that, maybe Todd, not overstepping a little bit, is within this cost of service, as you see those stepping into about $500,000 to $600,000 a year in increased revenue, that is, we did take into account capital outlays for that. So it is providing the gas utilities a little bit more flexibility in that regard, to expand the system where appropriate and where economical. So, okay. Last, or slide 11, please. I think 2 ahead. Thank you. So this is taking all the graphics you just saw and the rate recommendations into play, and looking at, what does an average bill or an example bill look like for SoCalGas, for a competitor or for a customer using the same amount, what does it look like under BPU phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 versus SoCalGas? Again, the other comment I would reinforce of Todd's earlier is, SoCalGas will likely, be increasing their rates over time as well. So you're seeing 3 years worth of bills here or rate impacts here for Vernon, but only one snapshot in time of SoCalGas. So my expectation would be that SoCalGas's cost will also be rising and their rates will be rising. So this is basically a worst case scenario with the 3 phases for Vernon. This is showing you in these 3 different tables, it's showing you G2, G3, and G4. You can see there what the average customer or what the commodity consumption level is for each of those customer classes, and how we translate that into a bill for SoCalGas and BPU. So you can see here the 12,000 therm customer in G2. You can see the charges that are embedded in their bill or that make up their total bill. You can see the transport commodity or the big dollar amounts there that total up to just under $10,000 or $9,700 a month for that customer and SoCalGas using 12,000 therms a month. If we translate that and look at phase 1, 2, and 3 in Vernon, you can see here the phase 1 bill, just by removing the 5% discount that's currently being seen by your customers, they're still close to 40% under the SoCalGas. And as you step through those changes in phase 2, phase 3, if you recall, it was about 5% or so, the annual adjustment, and you see that reflected in that monthly bill. Not exactly 5, but it depends on the size of the customer, but down to 32% under SoCalGas current rates, and then 27% under SoCalGas rates. So you see this table is simply repeated at different consumption levels for G3 and G4. G3, I'll remind you, you can see there's no commodity dollars in that row for commodity. That's because they're buying their own gas out in the market. BPU is just transporting it to their meter and to their client site. You can see the customer charges, the transport charges and riders flowing through, and you see the total bill there, still at about 7%. In this case, for a 200,000 therm customer, they're about 7% each year below what SoCalGas would be, even after the full phase in. Finally, G4, again, same structure here. We're at about 30, 24, and then 19% under at the end of the 3-year phase in under SoCalGas's bills for that customer. So again, you're in like the sweetest spot you can be for a utility. You're able to fully recover your cost of service. You're able to phase in rates very manageably, I would say, to provide a manageable impact for your customers. You're also in a very, very good competitive position to your customers. You're funding your capital, you're funding your operations, and you're creating a standalone gas enterprise from a financial standpoint. So really, there's an enormous amount of good news here for the utility and your competitive position. And if there's no questions on,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to slow things down, but the riders for the G3 for SoCal are only 1,500, but Vernon, they're 14,000.
Yeah, it's a structural issue with the way it's primarily a greenhouse gas rider with the state. It's a regulatory type of a rider that you're essentially paying the fees for that. Where in SoCalGas, my understanding and my what I've seen in their rates is they're able to spread that. They've got a different cost structure in that regulatory charge that they can spread out a little differently in their utility than BPU can. So that rider is strictly a state regulatory one. I will say that that's applicable to 3 of the 4. There is one of the customers, I think it's Owens Corning, if I remember right, that doesn't require that rider. So one of your larger customers doesn't have that, but others do.
Thank you.
And with that, I think I'll turn it back to you, Todd, for the next steps.
Thanks, Tony. And Jack, I do believe Owens takes care of that on their own by themselves. So they still have it. They just, we don't do it for them. And then Jack, just to follow up to your first question, just one other thing that came to mind was, in addition to that cost to connect, some of the customers are in long-term contracts with SoCalGas. So it's hard for them to just break away, from that contract. So there's a timing issue as well. So hopefully that answers your question. Matthew, do you mind moving on to the next slide? Okay, so we just wanted to give you an idea of our timing and what we plan to do. In order to present this to you, we presented to city administration to get their buy-in on moving forward last month. We also made some outreach to the chamber just so they were aware of what we were doing. You know, we welcome input from the business community, and you know, we just want the business community to understand where we're going with this and why we're doing it at this point, to make a rate adjustment and just to recover our costs. We presented today, and then we plan to hold community stakeholder meetings in March. So on March 16th, similar to the ones we held for water or the IRP, more of a discussion or a panel where customers can come and see the presentation and get answers to the questions. And then we plan to take this to City Council for formal approval May 3rd. And should City Council approve, then we would plan to implement an adjustment on July 1st. And then, you know, July 1st for the impending years, for the 3 years, you would see that phased in. Next slide, Matthew. So at this point, you know, if you have any more detailed questions for Tony, if I can answer anything else for you. And then we do have a number of people standing by who work in the gas utility every day, if you have any other specific questions. But in terms of the presentation, you know, that concludes our presentation.
I don't mean to hog things, but are the number of BTUs that you're, call it selling, are those numbers increasing, decreasing, staying the same?
So Tony, you know, I'm sure you could back this up from what you saw throughout the study, but Jack, we believe they're increasing.
Okay.
I have a question. You know, firstly, great, you know, presentation, Tony and Todd. Thank you very much. It was very, you know, knowledgeable, you know, for us to learn about it. My question to you is this: how long is a contract for a you know, for a new customer from you know, VPU gas versus SoCal gas?
Not locked, they're not locked in, allow flexibility. So it's hard for us to know exactly, you know, how the SoCal gas contracts are constructed with each individual customer. But we you know, when we approach customers, we do see that they have sometimes a long-term arrangement. I'm not sure exactly how to quantify that on the SoCal gas side. But typically for us, when we connect a customer, there is a cost of connection, and usually in a very short time, just a matter of a year or two, maybe 3 at the most. That cost of connection with the lower rate that we charge makes it advantageous for the customer. So if a customer plans to be here more than a few years, through that cost to connect, you know, they would see those savings, you know, in a very short period of time if they plan on doing business in Vernon for, you know, more than just a few years.
A question that I have, you know, in my experience in Vernon and seeing customers go through the process of getting natural gas to their facility over the years, sometimes I'll find or will find that it's an easier job for one location, obviously, than another because of the infrastructure. And my question is, as far as infrastructure goes, is Vernon and SoCal Gas on a level playing field where you all have, you know, the pipes in the street? How is that set up in the city?
So Thomas, we have a very similar distribution system, and typically where SoCal Gas is in the street, so are we. So that was the idea when the gas system was constructed, that we can compete on a level playing field with SoCalGas. What isn't level is they have a massive amount of customers, a massive amount of employees, a massive service territory, massive footprint. Our gas division is made up of about four to five people. So in terms of staffing, we have a small but responsive staff. And in terms of the differences in connecting, one reason that we connected, the bigger customers first was because they were able to sort of take advantage of that cost of connection and see that, the lower rate would benefit them more quickly as that cost of connection was sort of realized. The other thing that we've done recently, which we hope to do more of, is we've been able to purchase a smaller bucket truck. So that, part of our problem was when we get down to the medium or smaller customers, with the bigger customers, we contracted that work out to our contractor, which is AM Ortega right now. And so we were paying them to connect the bigger customers because we didn't have the equipment available to make that connection. As we get down to the medium and smaller, we purchased the equipment to really bring that cost down for the customers, so we can connect more customers in those smaller sort of therm usage. So where we don't have to go to a contractor to make that connection, we can do it ourselves, within our own crew with, a smaller equipment that can be operated by our crew, cuts the cost down quite a bit. So, that in terms of funding the CIP, those are the things that we think we can do in the future, is make it more advantageous, bring the cost down for that connection, connect more customers, make it easier for customers to connect and realize that savings quicker.
Thank you. I've seen that, a customer being given a choice between SoCalGas and Vernon. Oftentimes they will go with Vernon because of the speed which you can react compared to the gas company.
Absolutely. So in terms of, what we really try to do, affordable rates, really reliable service, but we really do try to have that personal touch, that responsiveness. If you come up to the third floor, you come into customer service, you're going to see a person. We're going to try and handle things right away. You'll see our people out in the street. So we really do try to be responsive to customer needs.
I think that's accurate. And I think you guys generally have been, from my experience. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Thank you. Were there any other questions from commissioners? Okay. If not, we really appreciate the time today. We would really appreciate your support on the recommendations. If you have any more questions or input for us, please get that to us as we move through the process, to reach out and have more customer meetings and then move toward taking this item to council. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Tony.
You bet. Thank you for the time.
Okay, now we will go to oral reports.
If we could just quickly, Chair Klein, see if any attendees wanted to comment on this item.
Sure. Does anyone want to comment?
I currently see no hands raised in Zoom.
If any of the participants would like to comment, please use the raise your hand button down at the bottom of your screen. I think we're okay to proceed.
Okay, now we will go to oral reports.
Actually, let's do the consent calendar first.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
All right. May I have a motion for the consent calendar, item number 3? I need a motion, guys.
Larios?
Motion by Commissioner Larios,
Is there a second?
Second,
seconded by Commissioner Condon to approve the consent calendar, which are the minutes of several of your meetings from the end of last year. I'll call the roll. Chair Klein,
Aye.
Vice Chair Andrioli,
Aye.
Commissioner Condon,
aye.
Commissioner Larios,
Yes.
Commissioner Sakdaba.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, now we will go to oral reports.
I do not have any staff reports.
Okay, so are there any reports from commissioner staff? And Lisa, there's none?
None from staff that I know of.
Any reports from the commissioners? Okay. Without any further business, I adjourn this meeting at 9:51.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone, for your participation.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye now.